Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bruce Sanchez. Thank you, Stefan, and all of the folks at Adobe for giving us the opportunity to present just the fun that we're having with DITA within the FAA. Bernard, are you on? Bernard may be still muted.
He may be having some bandwidth issues, Bruce.
Okay.
So I just assume he's there, and we'll try and track him down for you. Okay.
All right. I'll press on. I believe he has the advance.
There we go. I think somebody had to unmute me.
Oh.
Somebody had to click and unmute. There we go. The joys of technology. Hey, everybody.
When you're on the phone, you cannot unmute yourself. I just noticed. Muted you.
Excellent. All right, my wife.
That also means I can mute you anytime. Okay, enjoy.
All right, excellent. So as Bruce mentioned, there's a couple of different things that we're going to talk about. I listened in through the last session and was smiling away a couple of times and shaking my head in sympathy at some of the issues that they had come up to. So some of the key topics that we're going to investigate are from the same information that you saw. And there is the official disclaimer at the bottom. This is Bruce and myself presenting. It's not the FAA speaking. It's two guys. One is a Canadian and one owns a brewery. So, Bruce, I don't know if you've got a beer ready to go, but I'm pretty close to being ready. You want to give a quick background on yourself?
Celebratory beer at the closing of this, absolutely.
Excellent. And your background?
Right. So I've been a FAA employee for the last 30 plus years. I started my career on the DoD side doing technical publication and power systems for the Air Force, and then migrated to the FAA, another aviation related issue. And I always was part of our second level engineering jobs were producing technical publications. So I have been producing tech pubs for decades, which is kind of scary. And all of that has also coincided with a lot of the technical leaps that we've made over the last decades as well. So when I transitioned from the Air Force over to the FAA, not every engineer had a computer on their desk. We were still producing photo-ready tech pubs, whether it was an instruction manual or a maintenance technical handbook. So most of that was all done very manually back when the terms cut and paste literally meant cut that piece of text with your X-Acto knife and paste it over the top of what you're trying to do. So the evolution from then till now it has been.
I love the one slide you have. You've got a couple of slides, and there's one that shows the simplified view. And just the idea that the legacy environment moving forward and how you're looking to enhance how things are being done right now in order to remove some of the challenges that are being faced. That slide made me laugh, so that'll be coming up shortly.
We've tried to inject as much humor as possible into this PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun one. I think it's one or two down the road. And you've also got the FAA organizational structure. I was just amazed at the scope of what we were working with. I came in partnership with Adobe on behalf of our company, Publishing Smarter. And we just really started off early on by pushing the idea of content strategy, going in and identifying those various components and getting good answers to it, putting together a lot of information. And as we worked our way through, I think, Bruce, you probably had to communicate both up and down the chain internally in order to put forward the message on just how important some of the things that you're doing. And we've got the FAA organizational structure. And somewhere inside this thing, your group falls. Do you want to give us a quick insight where you are in the organization? How many people are in FAA?
Oh, there are literally over 10,000 employees within the FAA. Right. So
you're not a startup.
No, we've been around a little while. We've gone through so many. It used to be the CFA, the Central. I forget what that acronym was. We just loaded with the C of acronyms. But I'm a a employee, a second level engineering, that I support all of the facilities that handle air route traffic control. So all of the air route traffic control centers that are much different than a typical tower or an in-flight service station. So these are large facilities that have upwards of 2 megawatts of backup power in the basement, to make sure that the air traffic controllers, like my son, have a 24/7, 365 view of their radar scopes. So under the red highlighted box is really my boss's 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 boss. That's literally how far down the food chain I am.
And then within that, we go further.
Right. So I'm part of the technical operations organization. So under that red box is my boss's boss's boss. And we are in just the technical operations line, and we are completely separated as lines of business from our IT group, who is in, which I'm smart for them, they're in the financial line of business. So they have a direct line to all of the check writing capabilities, whereas we do not. We are typically
so your equivalent of the CEO. Your equivalent of the CEO isn't going to bump into you in the hallway and go, Bruce, how's it going?
Not a chance.
Okay, and then this is the slide that killed me because it's titled Simplified. And NAS stands for?
The National Airspace System.
All right, and then what are we looking at? I know you mentioned an area into the top left for me at one point, and then started talking about it, and this just scared me.
Right. So that top left portion represents a facility that handles typically an airport. So from the three main lightning bolts to the left are your long-term navigation, your long distance communication, your GPS facilities, your weather stations, all of the facilities that feed in information to allow the controllers and the pilots an awareness of their current situation, whether it's while they're en route from point A to point B, whether they're going to encounter turbulence along the way, anything that can aid them in the information gathering to let them do their jobs. That's where those are. Then the smaller little lightning bolts to the right of that facility are the direct lines of communication between the controllers and the pilots and anything else that is a one-to-one. So you've got this huge sea of support capabilities that all feed in to make sure that everything is 100% safe and everyone knows where everyone else is, so that we can have the safest airspace in the world.
I just got a message from somebody who said, I think I can see Waldo. So for those who haven't had the chance, the Where's Waldo, the white and red striped shirt, probably somewhere inside. But this is all one massive interconnected system that has to have clear communication start to end.
And typically is quad redundant at a minimum.
So DITA, the slide has a couple of bullet points, but can you just work your way through those a little bit? And I know between the two of us, we'll probably bounce back and forth, but you're the one who's helping to drive a lot of this change. I know based on what we've looked at that there's this massive volume. Even a single document is particularly large, lots of groups involved. But go ahead, I'll let you work through the slide sort of top to bottom and hit us up on why is the FAA in a position where they're considering DITA?
Right. So what we've done technology-wise within the FAA, there's so many, we talked about it earlier with one of the other presenters, there are, talk about a silo farm. Anytime you get into a federal government situation, you can spot silo after silo after silo after silo. So when the radar group is doing something, or the communications group is doing something, the weather group is doing something, the power group is doing something, there's always a ton of really, really smart people trying to do the best thing that they possibly can. But more often than not, their schedule is so tight and so driven that quite often the intercommunication between the organizations falls short. So everybody pretty much works a lot harder instead of a lot smarter. And what we've done over the last few decades of this technology being entered into the tech pub area, we've gone from printing a photocopy print of a page to now we can generate a lot of these pages electronically and reproduce the same document, but all that we really have is a electronic representation of a physical page. So we really haven't taken advantage of all of the enhancements that we could have or are available to us. So not only are folks really liking when they go to the training for a particular system, they see a video. We're being groomed to the YouTube culture of, hey, I can watch a short video and pretty much have a real good idea of what I need to do. Or I can, have my smartphone or a tablet or a small laptop. So when we have this physical representation of a printed page, there's a huge amount of information that's lost in the translation from going from one source to another. So that's really been the biggest driver for me, as well as not only do we have a huge amount of technical publications and repositories, from facility to facility, there are at least 50 to 70% of the equipment within those facilities that are identical. The government tries to take advantage.
So one facility has a generator.
Excuse me?
So they've got a generator at one facility and a generator at the other facility. Those two generators from a strict, hey, here's the thing you put diesel into. When you fire it up, you get electricity out of it. They're physically the same thing. So the maintenance, et cetera, that's going to have a lot of commonality to it. But there's also going to be unique things. Alaska, I'm assuming, has differences in the equipment they need from, say, Texas. Give or take the odd seasonal issue that comes in. I mean, there's going to be ice, there's going to be snow, there's going to be sub-zero temperatures on a regular basis in one and far and few between in the others.
Right. Everything from Miami to Guam to Anchorage to Nome, Alaska, there's a possibility of having the same piece of equipment, but its position or its accessibility or the number of people that are available to service those types of equipment all have an input to how often and how routine some of the maintenance is.
And then do you also have facility-specific information for that common content? At a certain point, a gas-powered may not work in weather that's too cold, and therefore you need to manage that kind of a generator differently.
Exactly. Anything, and the same engine might have a different fuel source. So one could be gasoline powered, one can be propane powered. So there are some various modifications once something gets on site to make sure that all of the different instances can be dealt with and are applied to the physical documents that those folks need on a day-to-day basis to maintain their equipment.
And you mentioned that a lot of the tech groups inside have large amounts of tech documentation. How big is a large amount? Is it like 50 page, 1,000 page, 10,000 pages, 1 million?
The power system at a air route traffic control center, there are 21 of those all over the country. It's 10 volumes, and each one of the volumes is at least 1,000 pages.
Okay, so they're looking at, and it's, I'm assuming it's not all written in like 18-point text with lots of white space. This is technical information.
Correct. Yeah. Everything from procedures to descriptions of the equipment and getting an overall, chapter 1 is always an intro. Chapter 2 is always a technical discussion. Chapter 3 is always the procedures. Chapter 4, all of those, the structure of those manuals are all, there's actually documents that are written, we call them FAA orders. There are documents that actually describe how you will write those documents.
So you have documentation in regards to creating documentation, and that probably goes beyond sort of the traditional style guide. Hey, a heading 1 is blue and a heading 2 is green.
Yeah, it goes back. Most of those specifications date back to pre-electronic as well. They're very photocopy based.
So if this stuff is that complex, where is it that DITA itself is starting to really appeal to you? Because there's a lot of different ways that content is currently being maintained.
Exactly. We're going through a big exercise now. We're actually combining repositories. We've got a large number of repositories at our sister location in Atlantic City, New Jersey, at the William J. Hughes Technical Center, as well as Oklahoma City is the Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center. We are two giant technical groups within the FAA, and we are migrating separate repositories into a single repository. So once you are within the FAA firewall and you want to find a particular document on a particular piece of equipment, you're actually going, prior, you might have gone to any of 1 or 3 or 4 different data repositories within the FAA. Now we have a large data center within Oklahoma City, and we're building and migrating all of these separate repositories into one massive FAA Tech Pub area. So we're really wanting to make things a lot more, always wanting to be more efficiency conscious. There's only so many dollars out there for our IT, and if everybody is off doing their own thing, we really are trying to become much more enterprise solution oriented.
And we know that in the DITA world, by and large, that the need for a specific software tool or a specific published output really starts to come away from your day-to-day discussions, and you start focusing much more on content. And there's a lot of tech that we can talk in regards to DITA. The challenge in a lot of cases is, how do you talk about that inside this huge organization? How do you, as you have at the beginning here, how do you change the approach to document development? And I know you've got 2 ideas here, the unstructured world and the structured world. Can you take us through the unstructured first?
Sure. Well, I would just say most of the unstructured one is how everything has been done over the last 20 years on a word processor. So we have a massive amount of tech pubs that have been produced by word processors. And the biggest Achilles heel of a word processor in trying to use a word processor to develop a large document, those, especially when the content is being developed at multiple locations by multiple authors with different levels of mastery of the particular word processor. So on the front of everything, all your headers and footers and everything look just the same, but at the same time, they can be the styles and the styles guides used, and the auto numbering or the figures or all of the under the hood types of information can be absolutely different. And then when you're trying to collaborate and combine and edit, you're constantly have the unfortunate instance of copying one thing over another and destroying a lot of the structure. And we spend more and more time trying to fix structural and stylize and format issues rather than fixing the actual content. So,
I'm laughing because my best man, when I got married, he said he's an engineer. He works in documentation. And at one point, as we're going through, I said, it would be great if trying to organize this entire wedding, if there was just a standard for weddings that I could follow and make my life easy. And he says, Bernard, you know that it's just like documentation. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, there's so many standards to choose from, and nobody chooses them consistently. And in the case of content, that seems to be the issue, right? Word is the standard, but then within it, everybody uses the template that they feel like using, and maybe they're using it consistently, maybe they're not. But you end up having this massive headache of trying to go through and not only find consistencies across all of your content, but even finding consistencies within content, and even within content written by the same people. So if we flip that and we go to the structured side, and you're looking at that type of content, what changes? What is it that you're bringing across internally in the conversation to tell the people at FAA? Jared says, doesn't make me want to get on a flight exactly. This is the ground operation side as well. This is making sure that the infrastructure runs. And because of how important it is, that's why these things are in place. Everybody has consistently done things that they can in order to get to that same end goal. And on paper, in print, it may look fine, but the structured world gives you a much stronger digital environment to work with as well. So do you want to take us through structured a little bit?
Sure. So what we really need to communicate to all of our authors is really a complete paradigm shift, where 5 years ago, I asked a lot of our folks that were our technical documentation management side, like, all right, there are structured environments that are out there. This is 5 years ago, what is the 5-year plan for our documents? Are we going to move towards content, or are we going to go towards large whole-scale documents? And unfortunately, at that time, the answer was they would rather manage large PDFs than the actual content. I was quite upset and went on my merry way and said, I wasn't the decision maker on those types of things. So I just soldiered on in the existing word processor environment. So what we really need to address to folks is, all right, we really need to rethink what your content is. And I always use the analogy for software, where it's object-oriented software. So the reasons why we've come so far in software over the last 10 years is we're not trying to reinvent the wheel all the time. We're using small snippets of code over and over and over again to provide these ridiculous graphic capabilities and all of the different software-related advances that we've had. There are a result of using small chunks over and over and over. That typically will will resonate with people and get them to think, okay, you're right. We use these warning, caution types of information over and over and over and over in our documents. Why am I changing 100 documents when I could actually change one source? And another driver of all of these different, site-specific things in our documents where we can use conditional content. So all of the different aspects of a content managed document, whether it is either a figure of a circuit board or a picture of an interface or a caution warning label, those types of things that they can visualize, as really you'll gain a lot of traction with in a very short period of time. So that's.
I'm also thinking into the earlier. You had the earlier hierarchy of the organization, and then that simplified view. But the idea of looking at that and being able to drill down quickly into a specific piece of information is crucial to people inside the organization. And if you can do the same thing with content and as quickly as possible, get to that one piece that matters right now to do my job so that I can move on and do the next thing in order to continue to keep everything operating the way that it has to. And I guess as writers are starting to see that, as you start to show it to them, they realize that a lot of things that they've taken for granted, like, hey, on paper it looks the same, is going to have to change because digitally there's going to be different requirements. Your PDF, your future environments, you're going to have different display platforms that'll take the exact same information and display it different ways. How are they responding to the ability to be able to do that?
It's a hurry up and wait situation. You know, everybody can use their phone to watch a YouTube video. When, you know, we try to incorporate that in a ginormous, you know, federal bureaucracy, there is always a loss in translation or a communication gap, or one group was doing something, another group is doing another thing. There's a lot of different competing groups, and it's, you know, the more what can you get done faster, a project with 3 people, or, you know, assign the same project to a group of 300 people and see how long it takes you to get that project done.
Right. And 300 has all of the overhead that goes with it as well. I mean, there's the management overhead, there's all of the extra meetings, all the decision making. I'm just thinking something as simple as seeming as changing a warning to a caution or a note to a danger, and the amount of work that's required to make that change and track down what is it going to impact. Whereas if you're in a structured environment, you can drill down and say that specific piece of information, because you've got this entire behind the scenes technical architecture, you can say that note, where is it used? What's the impact if I change it into a danger?
Or throw a pandemic into the mix and see how you can formally require 2 people for an electrical installation or a change, and now those people can't be within 6 feet of each other.
Oh, now you're just throwing hypotheticals. I mean, so you literally have people that are, I use the idea of the generator because it's one that I'm kind of familiar with. I can go off grid at my place. So you have these generators that are massive that'll help. You will potentially have 2 or 3 people originally that are required to maintain it. And in the legacy environment, all of that documentation is built for that type of an environment of 2 or 3 people. And then in the structured one, if you need to change that, you could go in once, rewrite the information, come up with, hey, here's what has to be done. Here's the new rules and guidelines. Here's your required PPE before you go in and work together. Here's your distance whenever possible. Here's what you do before your shift. Here's what you do after your shift. And you write it, and then you drive it out the door and you're done. Instead of going in and, again, having talked to 300 different people who are impacted by documentation, you can talk to the 3 that make the decision that then impacts the 300 people.
Exactly. Where you went and you just use a different code. Okay, are we at DEFCON 4 for our maintenance, or we are at DEFCON 1? You know, regular as, you know, proceed as normal kind of activity.
And then in order to make all of this happen, you've been building this structured environment pretty much from scratch. I mean, your legacy content was inherited, and it was a broad collection of information, again, based on different standards, with everybody working towards the same end goal of let's do the best that we can for everybody who uses our content. But you've had to go in and work through things like your information model. Do you want to walk us through a little bit of that?
Sure. A lot of my DITA, and I'm sure everyone in the audiences as well, as you put your head down and you try to learn it because you know that it's the right thing to do, and you think that you can, you know, make massive improvements not only in your areas, but you can also be a champion of that in other areas as well. So really learning and diving deep into DITA, and, you know, at one time, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, I attempted to do the very similar thing, and just like some of the previous presenter, you want to jump in and you want to start designing your system, and I tried to do that, you know, 5 years ago, and really lost a lot of traction. So taking that as a lessons learned, I did a lot more research on, you know, information models and what are really the foundational aspects of DITA. You know, what strategies do you need to look at? You know, do you have a structure? Do you have, you know, if you're going to build a structured environment, do you have the very basic components for that structure, which we didn't. So that was really the first step in developing our structured environment. To yes, we reference style guides or we reference the things that are out there, but there's really no mandate to use several of them. So
And
creating
when you went through and
information
started,
assets really was my goal was to put them out there, say this is, if we build it, we need to build it like this, and then we can build upon it once we get a firm foundation.
and I was really happy when we first started working on this. The team at Adobe that was involved in it with you reached out to us early on and said, "Hey, look, we're starting from scratch. Come in, let's have conversations." How useful was it to you to have built up that content strategy and to have been involved with us from pretty much every single phase of it in regular conversations to develop documentation that then guided where you were going moving forward?
Right. My group, we weren't necessarily in a vacuum, but we were a very small group to put this together. And when we started working with Adobe, and you guys were called in as well, we were generally certain that we had a good 70% model. And with working with Adobe and with you guys, we really got a lot of validation on the 70% that we had, whether 50% of it was good and 20% of it needed to be tweaked. And then, oh, by the way, here are other slices of the pie that you really need to consider long-term, short-term, setting some goals and, up front on and putting a realistic time frame together, especially being in the government entity that we are. That was critical to us knowing that we were on the right track, and we're encouraged by the improvements that were made, as well as the realization of other aspects that we've totally missed that would, in the long term, hurt us, as well as if, the FAA is famous for requirement creep. So if we go to our management and say, oh, this is all we need, and we'll go forward, and then you forget, you miss a couple points, and then you add a requirement. Every time you add a requirement, you're going to add dollars most of the time as well. So having a broader, painting this DITA picture with a broader brush, and at least being able to communicate with our upward management and say, hey, yes, we have a lot of things that we are covering, but we can cover a lot of them incrementally and be able to provide what we want to provide to ultimately our customer, and our customers are the technicians in the field that are consuming our information.
And then once you had the behind the scenes desire documented, sort of this is where we are, this is where we want to go, here are the obstacles and the challenges that we're facing in order to get there, whether it's content or technology or governance or funding or whatever, you also started to implement CCMS, in this case AEM. And where is that? What's happening there for you right now?
So
sort of the last half of the slide.
Right. So when we were doing a lot of our initial investigations, we really didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but we also wanted to see if anybody else in all of our other lines of business, all the other silos, were doing similar things. And there were pockets of FrameMaker. There were pockets of, there was one, and I think one navigation system that the major contractor, whether it was a Rockwell or a Northrop Grumman, they actually had a CCMS-based system that they delivered with the actual hardware to be deployed. So we found out that there were also pockets, there were a couple AEM instances out there that the IT group was using it for forms as well as for some web development. So we already had a couple instances, and that was very much to our advantage. Well, if we can leverage the licensing at least of that, that'll make our efforts a little less vulnerable to the many levels of no that come along with any kind of trying to advance and use funds in particular ways. So having an instance of AEM out there and only needing to add the XML layer to it made it a little easier, as well contractually as well as implementation wise, that all right, we have a server out there we can leverage, and we can build on somebody else's infrastructure. And having that was very much to our advantage, where we actually were able to build all of our structured environment documents within DITA. The last thing I wanted to do was develop a DITA structured architect environment and use something that wasn't a structured environment. So, from the get-go, we were able to learn a lot about DITA and learn a lot about XML and AEM all together at the same time. And now we're moving forward with a lot of different prototype projects and a lot of conversions, and just really getting a feel for, this is definitely a crawl walk. We're not jogging yet, and ultimately we'd love to be running. So having that CCMS is a pivotal asset, manipulation, storage, relationships, and very, very a key component to it.
It's incredible when you have an organization that has that many people in it. Some people consider that to be a benefit. Some people consider it to be a drawback in order to go in and determine change. And I think it's just, you do what you can with the resources that are available. In a smaller organization, you approach it differently than in a larger one, but you were able to approach it and say, what else is being done internally? You were able to do the learning from other environments internally. You all spoke, generally speaking, the same language, and then you were able to go back. And I guess it's also nice because you make a bunch of connections along the way so that you can go back and say, here's what we're doing, and bring it in. But there's a lot of ongoing challenges that are going to still exist. So if you were to go through and address some of the challenges that the FAA faces, again, a couple of bullet points here to guide the conversation a little bit, but I mentioned 10,000 plus. Not every single one of them is a stakeholder, and yet they're all impacted by what gets done inside a documentation type of environment at some point. There's a lot here to unpack, and we are, give or take, about 45 minutes in. So we've got about 15 minutes left, and we've got about 2 or 3 more slides of content and a wrap up. If anybody has questions,
we have a couple
put them in the event chat.
Yeah,
I'm trying to address them as they come up.
We have a couple of questions for the Q&A pod. So once you finish, we can go through them.
Okay, perfect. And I'll see if I can work some of those in. So Bruce, if you want to hit us up with some of the challenges, and I'll start reviewing some of the questions in the chat.
Sure. Obviously, the biggest challenge we have are there's so many people involved to get on board and to change not only mindsets, but habits and preferences. And there's just the overall philosophical resistances to change. I've brought this up at several of our meetings, and I've done a lot of demos, and we've done a lot of introductory classes to, hey, this is something that we would really think the future is. This is where we can save a lot of time, effort, money, and I'm trying to get in front of as many audiences as possible. But a lot of times the resistance to change and the answers that are returned are, well, I don't have enough time to do my regular job. Where am I going to find time to learn this new stuff and then go through a transition period? And it's just the fear and anxiety of having to change and learn new stuff and not having to get behind on further things that these are the things that they're getting evaluated on a personal basis by their by their managers. So those kinds of resistances to change and that kind of challenge is huge. Each one of our organizations also has different processes and procedures. We all have there's a large number of configuration management and approvals that are required before anything goes out the door in an official publication. There are high-level configuration control boards for the different lines of business at that high level. And then at the lower level, there's several different automated processes and procedures going on in each one of the lines of businesses. So getting a single enterprise version of anything in a multiple sideload organization, somebody's going to have to, if we were the Borg, it would be awesome, but we're not. And getting the changes implemented at a large scale for different organizations to also understand and champion where really is the best way to go is just because it's better doesn't mean it's going to happen. And then
I just laughed when you said the Borg because I remembered that simplified NASA image, and that's the Borg, right?
Yeah.
There was a question as well about some of the templates. I know one of the challenges that you have is taking your legacy templates, the style guides, the writing environments, and trying to consolidate it or standardize it. Can you address that one a little bit, some of the things that you're considering and doing?
Absolutely. We have implemented some word processor templates to try to minimize some of the irregularities in a lot of the documentation. But ultimately, the style and format, we have guides for style and format that if you're going to do a maintenance technical handbook, the paragraphs are number alpha, number II, and we've got all this structure involved that any template that you build has to comply with those existing paper-based templates. So when you have a CCMS or you have an AEM and you can apply templates and provide the structure for people, I actually think it eases some of the anxiety on, well, how am I going to do this now? Or you get your writer's block looking at a blank page, where if you need to write a procedure, now you've got a pretty darn good template that you can use if you're going to use a troubleshooting guide or a task concept. You have a little bit of a head start on that structure. So having those templates available for those, I believe, will be a very much a proponent of folks that from a blank page perspective really get a lot of benefit and are able to hit the ground running with a template.
Did you find that the legacy documents, did you find that the legacy documents themselves helped drive some of the structural components that you were building so that you could have these information models that were pre-populated, that already had the right metadata in place in order to simplify the decision-making of authors?
Well, not only the authors, but all the metadata. So we've got FAA documents that describe FAA documents that describe taxonomies. So every airport, it has a 3-letter designator. Every piece of equipment has a facility system identifier code. Our documents are numbered with its own taxonomy. So when you are able to bring all of the physical structures that are in place are amazing, and taking those physical structures for naming conventions and for airports and for equipment and for any subsystem, you can really hone in on a metadata perspective. And then the biggest thing from one of the other presentations today was all the duplication that's out there. if you're doing a search and you come back with 17 hits of virtually the same piece of equipment or the same document, then you can really see some really good reporting and do some real good investigation on the why that happened, and be able to trim as much fat as you might be able to. So those metadata that we have and the taxonomies that we can apply can also really give us a huge advantage on in that respect.
And I think we talked about a couple of these ideas on things, a couple of the bullets, the reuse idea, standardizing your templates, your content information, increased use of metadata. There were a couple of different questions related to why DITA. Did you consider something like S1000D? And if so, why would you choose DITA? What is it about I'm guessing reuse for sure, but what is it about DITA that gave you the answer that you didn't necessarily get out of something like S1000D?
Honestly, you mentioning S1000D, and I don't think it ever entered my mind when I was programming 30 years ago, and we were using these really cool things in the Air Force to handle the technical publications of the B-2. We got some information from the University of Illinois, and we were compiling these really cool things called web servers. This is like back in 1991. So I grew up writing and tagging. So and then some of the early FAA documents that we got back from Exide Powerware was actually XML or SGML based. We ingested some interleaf documents out of the blue the first time, and this is probably 1994 when we were had access and some familiarity with SGML. So that whole migration of HTML to SGML to XML to tagging to structure, that whole train of thought for me really was very basic and very simple and easy to walk through.
Yeah, especially when you compare it to the complexities of all of the other things that you have to do. Once you can get it down to say, okay, so there's a couple hundred elements to think about, and there's a couple dozen ways that you're going to combine things together in order to try to solve some of the challenges that's facing you. It definitely helps to have that kind of a background. In regards to
content is huge as well. So
yeah, I'm thinking the reuse. You've got your conditions, you've got your conrefs, your key values. So reuse is a huge part. Asset management, I think that's one that hasn't specifically been hit here, and the rest have. And then I'll move us to the next slide. But you want to hit up asset management for a moment? We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left here.
Sure. Within our power services group, we manage and maintain and continuously replace power systems. So to replace 21 power systems over the country with all of the equipment that's involved with that is definitely a multi-year endeavor. So we can, with our small group of about 24 engineers, we can probably do 4 facilities a year. And each one of these projects takes well over a year to complete from start to finish. So when we purchase a contract of, okay, we need 4 750 kW UPSs at each site. So we'll buy blocks of what we're going to use this year. Halfway through the year, the manufacturer will have multiple upgrades within that system, either a new LCD screen or a new circuit board or a new procedure for calibration. So configuration management is huge. So when we've got multiple UPSs with multiple configurations at multiple sites, it's virtually impossible to maintain a single document for each facility, because there's too many and there's too much. So if we can use
resistance is futile.
Exactly. So the pictures in their documentation will change from the picture of one circuit board with the proper test points to another circuit board where there's more test points, fewer test points in different locations. So having if we're managing at an asset level, we can change that figure on the fly. We can change a procedure on the fly and make it conditional to the facility, conditional to the serial number of the equipment that's in there. So if we didn't have any asset management, that would be virtually impossible.
And with about 2 minutes left on the clock, in a sentence or two, what's next? Where do you want to be in a year?
Further along. So, we're still migrating. We're still defining. We're still gaining acceptance. We're constantly improving a lot of the information that of all of our legacy activity, and at the same time, trying to migrate and do things in a smarter way. So the more people that can spell DITA in the FAA over the next year, it will be a win for me and our group.
Well, fingers crossed. Maybe next year we can come back and do a return visit and expand a little bit about some of the stuff we talked about today. If you're interested, and if Adobe's interested in having us back on it, I think generally speaking through the slides, we hit up a backgrounder on the introduction in the FAA and the work that you did, which is incredible. How you've worked inside the organization to speak both up and down the chain and help with some of the challenges that are being faced and bringing forward some of the DITA side of things. I want to just throw out a quick thank you to all of the attendees for participating today, Adobe for hosting this. It's weird to say thanks to me. It's in the slide deck from you, but FAA as well as you personally. And I just want to mention Twisted Spike. If people haven't had a chance to take a look at it, the fact that you also own a brewery and that the beer is good is something that really appealed to me when we started working together. It was just really nice to be able to know that, we can have meetings and have sort of a casual environment and talk about really serious stuff. But if anybody's interested, twistedspike.com. If we're in Oklahoma City, if anybody's coming by, do you mind if we stop in and say hi in person?
Oh my gosh, please do. I have a small cult following at the training facility here where when people come in from all over the country, we have the main training facility for all these systems, whether it's nav, comm, power, is in Oklahoma City. And as soon as the technicians land, some of the trainers are some of my friends from years and years ago. And everybody wants to know what's fun to do in town, since either it's their first time or their second time in. And their first things out of their mouth is, go to Twisted Spike. Go see Bruce. He's an FAA guy. Yeah,
I was really glad that you happened to send me up a sample of a couple of hops and water and barley, and put it all together into something that ended up showing up at my door last year. So thank you again to everybody. Stefan, I'll turn it back over to you and Matt, and I will meet you here in a moment. Bruce, can we just, if you don't mind, can you hit up the chat? There's some question and answers in there. Maybe you and I can stay around for a few minutes and address those. But all yours, Stefan.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bruce. Thank you so much,